Welcome everyone to the basics of freelancing. My name is Cassidy Sorry and I'm the Marketing and Events Manager for the University of St Andrews Entrepreneurship Centre. Today our session is being facilitated by Keith Millican, who is the Director of Enterprise. So I'll let Keith introduce himself and talk a little bit more about the session and what's coming. But just to say, if you haven't engaged with the Entrepreneurship Centre before, or you do have any questions before or after this meeting, our email, which I will put in the chat, is open and we will be delighted to meet, chat with you for whatever needs you have at all. So over to yourself, Keith.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cassidy. Well, welcome everybody and thanks for turning up and tuning in. This is going to be fairly fast-paced, but you can always contact me afterwards if you want to discuss any particular issues in more detail. As Cassidy says, I'm the Director of Enterprise here and I work with Bonnie, Hacking and Cassidy. And our role is really to help turn ideas into the businesses of tomorrow. And just by way of context, I'm a chartered accountant by training. I'm also a chartered director and a fellow of the Institute of Directors. But my background really is in forensic accounting, corporate finance, global packaging companies and startups. And then I was a freelancer for a number of years before arriving here in St Andrews and then helping open up the Entrepreneurship Centre in September 21. So I've done this stuff, I've lived the pain, and I also have another business that advises freelancers. So hopefully this will be relevant to you. You really must read the small print, okay, when you have a contract. Always read the small print. And just to make sure that I'm protecting myself, these slides are for general guidance only. And if you have a particular thing that you want to find out about, you should consult with a professional advisor. You can come and talk to us afterwards and we'll try and help as we can. And Bonnie quite rightly points out to me that as a student visa holder, basically you can't do any of this. But if you need more detail on that, please talk to Bonnie because she's more expert on this than I am. Okay, so we'll get cracking. So how do we get started? And I thought we should start with a definition of what a freelancer is. So, you know, freelancers can be photographers, they can be designers, they can be stylists, they can be writers, actors, musicians, editors, whatever you want to do. And I've pretty much supported people in every one of those categories. But, you know, a freelancer is someone who manages their own time, works on their own short-term contracts and projects for a wide variety of clients. And the interesting thing to note is that HMRC, the tax authority, doesn't recognize that term, the freelancer, okay? It calls them self-employed or sole traders, okay? So if you're self-employed or a sole trader, you have to submit your self-assessment tax form in your own name each year. Some of you will say, well, hold on a minute, Keith, I can set up a limited company and I can still be a freelancer. Yes, you can, but you won't be self-employed and you won't be a sole trader because that limited company, which you can set up at Companies House for 34 quid, will employ you. You'll have some sort of service contract with them. And sometimes it is better to set you up that way for particularly if you're in high risk consulting. But I'm going to talk about the first one. I'm going to talk about the one on the left-hand side, HMRC, if you're a sole trader or self-employed. That's what the rest of this chat is going to be about. So how do I get set up? Most important thing to remember is you can have a side hustle now. As long as you earn less than £1,000, and when I say earn less, that means income minus expenses. So you could sell £2,000 worth of goods and it costs you £1,001 to buy them. You make £999 profit. You don't need to register with HMRC or Companies House. You can keep that. So you can test out your side hustle really cheaply to see if anybody wants to pay for it. However, if you are going to earn more than 1,000, you should register. And this website here, Register for Self-Assessment, it's pretty easy. You choose your own name, give it your own name or a business name. There are certain rules about what you call yourself. So you would be called Keith Millican trading as, or KMCS trading as Keith Millican, you know, whatever, however you want to put that on there, you can put it on there. But you can't call yourself LTD or LLP. That's limited liability partnership or a limited company. Can't use those terms. My advice to you is open up a separate bank account for your side hustle. If you don't, and you just use your own personal account with the bank will start to look at the number of transactions in there and they'll say, you're being naughty, you're using it for business purposes, we're going to close your account. And I've had a number of clients where that's happened because they just haven't listened. There is another thing that you need to think about, which is making tax digital. Basically, HMRC only want to deal with you through software. And pretty much everybody's going to have to use some sort of software, free software from your bank, things like Free Agent or, QuickBooks, FreshBooks, Xero, any of those things. Banks offer something for free now, so take them up on it. But basically, if you're not going to do it yourself, your accountant will do this stuff for you. But pretty much everybody's going to have to use it by 2027. Why? Well, of course, it's to make life easier for you. It's to make things more efficient. But really, it's because the tax authorities want to get to your earnings and tax payments as fast as possible. And if anybody tells you any different, they're not telling you the truth. So less than £1,000 of earnings, i.e. income minus expenses, you don't need to do anything. If you're above that, you should register. Everybody talks about VAT. When should I register for VAT? The threshold is 90,000. It would be lovely to be making £90,000 a year as a freelancer. And if you can do that off the bat, good for you. But actually, sometimes you make a lot less than 90,000 and it makes sense for you to register. Partly because it can make you look professional. We all know that. Oh, if they're VAT registered, they must have turnover more than 90 grand. But sometimes customers, particularly limited companies, prefer to deal with a VAT registered entity, but not always. There's some downsides to it. You need to charge them more. You can go into different VAT schemes. There's administrative burden. You've got to do stuff every quarter. And my advice to you when you're starting off is keep away from VAT, unless you are going to hit that £90,000 threshold. It's just something you don't need to worry about, in the very early stages. There are two things certain in life, and taxes is one of them, okay? And tax, as I said, is charged on profits, which is income less expenses arising in a tax year. And for some strange reason, which I'll explain to you in a minute, the tax year runs from the 6th of April in one year to the 5th of April in the next year. Pretty much every other country runs pretty much 1st of January to 31st of December. Why are we different? Okay. We're different because of the Romans and Julius Caesar and Europe. So we moved from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar back in the 1500s. And then there was a gap in the 1700s of 11 days. And those in the know determined that each tax year should be 365 days. So they moved it from, it was, I think, in the 25th of March in the 1700s, and they moved it to the 5th of April. And it has been like that ever since. It's bonkers, but it's never going to change. So all you got to remember is it's only earnings between those periods, 6th of April to the 5th of April, that are going to count, okay? Again, don't panic about tax. It is really straightforward because you can get somebody to do it for you. But if you are going to pay tax, how do you pay tax? And you may all know this. It's all done by bands. And of course, we in Scotland don't like to have the same sorts of bands as in England. We like to make it even more complicated. So we've added more bands. So this example here says, if I make 20 grand, how much tax will I pay on that? Well, the first 12,570 is zero. That's assuming you've got no other income or interest, etc. That's your personal allowance. So you're allowed to make up that, no tax paid. And then we start to get into the starter band and then the basic rate, etc. So basically, that's how it works. You go from 19% up to top rate of 48%. But let me just point out for you really successful freelancers who are in that 100,000 to 125,000 bracket of earnings, i.e. income less expenses. On that chunk between 100,000 and 25,000, you're paying a marginal tax rate of 60%. So every pound you earn over 100,000, you only get 60p. You only get 40p. You're paying 60p in tax. So you want to find a way to get around that, and the way to do that is with expenses. So yeah, again, tax, it's a fairly straightforward standard calculation. You must have some software to do it. There's tons of stuff out there, or you get your accountant to do it. An accountant prepare your tax return. and your sole trader accounts somewhere around about £1,000, £1,200 for the year. Okay, shop around for it. It's fairly, if you're really easy to deal with, it shouldn't cost you that much, and at least you know it goes in properly. One of the other things to think about when you're doing your earnings is that you use cash or accrual. Right, now let me explain what that means. In a period, if you've been paid, you've got the cash that goes into your bank. That's your earnings number. If you've raised an invoice to somebody but they haven't paid you between the 5th and 6th of April, you can bring that in. That's called accrual accounting. You want to avoid that, right? Stick with cash. Cash is simple. It's real, right? Get it in your bank. Keep a track of it. It's like Quicksilver. If you don't manage that process, you can get into trouble. So again, all standard tax bands. This is boring but important. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Expenses. You've got to keep good records, okay? And you've got to stick them in the file. And your expenses, the classic word is wholly and exclusively for the purposes of your business, okay? Things that have a dual purpose, like clothing, cannot be claimed, okay? And this is the example here. And by the way, you can have these slides. Don't make too many notes. I'll send you these slides, okay? So what expenses can I claim for, Keith? Well, if I'm a theatre critic and my job is to go to shows in the West End, I can probably claim all those tickets, okay? I can't claim for the plumber that came to fix my plumbing in my house, okay? That's not going to work. If I'm a plumber and I want to try and claim for theatre tickets, that's not going to work either, okay? Because it's not the main line of my business. So you just have to be sensible about it. And there are some schemes in there that HMRC will allow for use of home office, use of your home telephone, and those sorts of things. And we can help you with those. But the important thing is keep good records, because if HMRC come to investigate you, there's a very, very small chance that ever happens. You better have it ready. Okay. So when do I pay my tax? Now, this is quite important because you actually pay more tax than you're due in the first year. So if you take, for example, we owe 2,400 this year. Inland Revenue HMRC says, Keith, you're going to owe 2,400 next year as well. So I'll tell you what we'll do. You need to pay me my 2,400 now, and you need to give me half of next year's as an accelerated payment. So actually, by the 31st of January, I have to pay 3,600. Now, most people who are starting off as freelancers would only have the 2,400 because they'd forget there's a payment in advance. Okay. And then what happens is you pay the balance of next year's assumed tax bill by the 31st of July. And then when you send in your tax calculation, you pay the balance. If it's more than 2,400, you have to pay that balance together with the start of next year's assumed tax payment on the next 31st of July. So all this is doing is accelerating revenues for HMRC, and you're doing that, you're fronting it up. But why this is important is that when you sell to a freelancer, take some money and stick it in another account, and that's your tax account. Okay, so when you get to this period, you've actually got that money. You don't have to go overdrawn or milk a credit card or borrow. So every time you send an invoice out, just rip out 30% and stick it in a tax account, and then you're going to be covered for the following year. If you don't file your tax return on time, if you don't pay your tax on time, you get £100 penalties left, right, and centre, and you start to get charged interest on overdue tax. But in the first year, HMRC will get your tax account wrong. Don't worry about that. Once you've filed your tax return and you go into your online account, after a couple of weeks, they'll have rectified it and got it right, and you'll be able to see the payments going through. But just be aware of that payment on account, because it catches a lot of people out, and they say, "Where did that come from?" You know. And there's even more taxes you need to be aware of. National insurance, which is in the press at the moment for employers, NIC. You as a freelancer, assuming your profits are over the 12,570, same as the personal allowance, you need to pay class 2, which is £3.45 per week. You have to do that. In addition, they decide that you need to pay class 4 on profits between 12,570 and 50,000. So if you're on 50,000, you're going to pay another 6% in there as well. So that's another tax. Why am I doing it, Keith? Why do I care about this? Because this goes towards your state pension. And by the time you're collecting your state pension, you're probably going to be 100, because they keep on putting the retirement rate up. But it does have a value to you in the future, particularly if you're you're going to be a constant freelancer and your pension contributions are going to sort of vary. You need to keep paying your national insurance contributions. Is that the end of the taxes? It is for the moment, okay? But just get to grips with them. Don't bother with VAT unless you're earning bundle. National insurance, you're going to have to do. It's straightforward once you register on the website for self-employed. Your personal tax return, beware of the fact that you'll be making a payment in advance in the first year, and then once you get into that cycle, you'll be okay. What else do you absolutely need? Insurance. Like Kanye West says, you got to have it. You know, if you don't have this, you are, as a sole trader, you have unlimited liability if somebody comes after you. And that's partly why some people want to set up under a limited company, because they can only go for the company, but you still need the same sort of insurance in the company. There's lots of people that provide this, the whole suite of these things here. Aon, Hiscox, yeah, lots of them. Go on there, go on to compare the market. You'll find them all do it. They'll all offer a standard package at the start, but get insurance in place, okay? If you're doing meaningful business, less than $1,000, don't bother. But if you're starting to deal with companies, I would absolutely recommend you get some insurance in place. Need buy the lowest package you can get, right? It's something like 250,000 of PI cover, and it gives you, $1 million of product liability or whatever that is. Okay. Get a package. It's a cost, but it's a tax deductible cost. You can also consider other insurances if you're making a lot of money, like critical illness or income protection. So that's if you're unable to make some money, then both those policies will pay out whilst you're incapacitated. But of course, be mindful at the start that that's a premium that you're going to pay every month, and it can be quite expensive, okay? But if you're young, fit, and healthy, then you're going to get a better deal than I am, my age. But definitely get some insurance cover. GDPR, what the hell we got here? Yeah, look, you're going to have databases with lists of names of people on, addresses, contacts, etc. Again, I think you just register for this. You go onto ICO. It's going to cost you £40 or something. Just do it, then you're covered for the year. It's a tiered process, depending on your size, but you probably need to do that GDPR stuff. Otherwise, you'll get caught by the legislation. So £40 is worth it for taking that headache away. So how are we going to operate? How much should I charge? Well, my advice is don't be a busy fool. Really don't. Have a look at the gig websites, Fiverr, Upwork, Freelancer, but sometimes it's a race to the bottom on price there. Yeah. So people are just bottom fishers. That's not really what you're after. So set your own rate that gives you the reasonable living that you want, or the reasonable reward for the value that you're preferring to your client. Yeah. So if you're giving them tons of value, charge them tons of price. Don't forget about the taxes. Like I said before, if you're charging somebody 100 quid, 30 quid goes into a savings account for your tax. Charging them £1,000 or 10 grand, still stick that 30% away. And negotiate, right? Everything's negotiable. Start high, talk about the terms. Is it fixed? How do you want your money? Do you want it all up front, half up front, someone accept, that sort of stuff. Find out what's the norm for your industry. So if you're doing marketing stuff, what's the norm there? And you can do that by looking at these sites, and there's lots of places we can help you go and have a look at. The other thing is, when you get started, you think, well, can I really charge that much? I need to be cheaper. Then don't give them the low price. Give them the high price. It's £5 grand normally, but because of you, I'm going to discount by 20%. So I'm only going to charge you to 4. Yeah. And then that way, psychologically, it's in their mind that, wow, I'm getting some real value here. But next time they come back, they're going to charge me 5 because it's a one-off discount structure. Okay. So use those sorts of things. I keep on going about saving the money. You are going to have days where you're earning nothing. You won't be doing nothing because you'll be looking for your next job. But you'll be, you need some sort of rainy day money, and you need, if you're going to do this as a living, to think about some sort of pension, whether that's an ISA or some other pension commitment. And then finally, increase your rates every year, regardless. Put them up, and don't be shy about 10%. I just put my rates up by 15. Every chance you get, stick them up. Repeat customers, they are gold dust. When I was in my freelance consulting business, I always felt I got 3 bites at the cherry with the customer. I was doing investigations on turnarounds for banks. The first 2 weeks was, well, I'll go in and have a look. And I'd come back and tell them, yeah, I found some stuff, but I need a bit longer. Second bite, they give me another 2 weeks. Yeah, I found some great stuff, but if you want the final plan, I need a few more weeks, and you're back in. Before you know it, you've done 6 weeks. But the customer's super happy because they got what they didn't know what they wanted at the start, but they got what they really wanted at the end of that process. So try and understand what the customer's really looking for, and that way you can try and turn them into repeat customers. Where are you going to find your customers? Where's my gang hanging out? Well, it depends very much on what your niche is, what your value proposition is. But you can look at the market, see who's buying what from where, what do they look like, where can you find them, how are you going to reach them, what's the market rate, and then you've got to create your own online presence. So you're all better at Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter than I am, but get a website, cheap as chips, Wix, Squarespace, just get something in that adds some proof points or some testimonials to it, okay? And then network. The most valuable tool in the box is networking. And you don't sell when you network, okay? You go and talk to people and just listen, have a conversation, get them to talk 80% of the time, and find out, do I have something that you might want? Do you have a problem that you're trying to solve at the moment and it's not working well? Can I help you with that? I'd always follow up, okay? And at the end of the day, people buy from people they like. So don't go in with a hard sell on day one. Hey, you need to buy my product. I'm number one in this, that, and the other. They don't care. Right? What they care about is the problem they're trying to fix, and that's the purpose of the conversation. So talk to them, listen. You don't need to sell at this stage. Networking isn't hard. It isn't about saying, so which company are you with? What do you do? Just engage them in anything. Just get them talking. You can use things like Statista or freelance marketplace like FeeUp or Upwork or People Per Hour to see what people are buying, what the rates are, where they're going to get that sort of information. And again, outside of here, we can give you a list of all those details. So the only thing you're selling here is expertise and time, and you really have to manage your time to avoid burnout. Use as many tools as you can to keep track of that. Notion, Trello, Monday. Write stuff down. It makes a clear intention, right? You're more likely to do it if you've written it down. Now, clients are buggers, so you need to set clear boundaries on them. And you need to communicate really super clear so you do not get project creep or burnout. And remember, as I said before, all the time you're not working on a project, you are working to try and get a project. Yeah. So a little bit more on this in a second. Getting paid, right? I'm going to talk about bad clients in a minute. The best way to get paid is get a contract. I'm going to show you that in a minute, right? It stops mission creep. It spells out exactly what you'll do, when you'll do it, and how you will get paid for doing that, okay? You're going to get some difficult clients who don't want to look at your contract, don't want to sign your contract. Just walk away. Just be tough enough to walk away, because that's a sign they're a bad client. If you're in the middle of a job and a client starts making demands for you to change things that weren't in the original spec, that is a variation. And you write to them and say, okay, you've asked me to do these things. This is a variation to what we agreed, and it's going to cost X. Are you approving me to move on with this? So just get it in writing, okay? And then always, just be firm and polite. That's professional, and they'll respect you for it. But bad clients are there, and we're going to talk about them now. And by the way, I've suffered in all of these. Clients who want to nickel and dime me, try and get the price lower. You set your price, you set your rates, you set your value, walk away. Because it's more often than not, you take that client and they're a complete pain in the backside and you just don't want to be with them. I've had demanding clients who expect you to be on call 24/7, particularly if they're overseas. You've got to really manage that and say, nope, these are the hours you can contact me. Out with that, no chance. Never give them your work mobile. Overcomplicated clients, these are the ones who start off with a brief and then they try to make it grow arms and legs to sort of expand. They're a nightmare, because the reality is at the start, when you did the spec with them, they thought they knew what they wanted, but they didn't. And then as you've taught them, as you've gone through the process, they've gone, oh, maybe it'd be better if I had a bit of that in there. Really slamp down on that, and that's where you're getting variations on there. Anybody who won't sign a contract with you, just walk away. And do not work for free. Do not offer trial work. Yeah. And then the last thing with clients is make payment easy for them, right? Get your paperwork in place, get your invoicing right, get the right name of the company or the individual, get the right address. And if that means you have to call them up in advance, like the finance team in the other company, or whatever, do that, because they'll take any excuse possible to delay payment, okay? Because they want to hold the cash flow. So what does a contract look like? We can give you one of these. It just sets out the key terms between me and you, the client, what I'll do for you, the time scale in which I'll do that for you, and make clear what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, what I'll guarantee and what I won't guarantee, and it sets out how you will pay me, okay? And if you don't pay me, what the penalties are for late payment. So there's lots of these out there. We can give you sort of a template if you want one, just to have a look at it, but they're all pretty similar to each other. And that's what I say, get it in writing. And I said before, it's always negotiable. If they turn around and say we can't sign that one and they offer you their contract, look at it carefully, read the small print, and particularly look for the words warranties and indemnities and put a line through them. Just put a line through them, right? Because they're going to be damaging to you if it goes wrong. They'll end up putting them back in, but you'll have to negotiate on them. But just think, if I'm doing a £5,000 piece of work for you, Mr. Client, for indemnities and warranties up to 100,000, why would I do that? Yeah. So, you have to keep it in context. The most you could sue me for would be £5,000. No, and you need to get that in the contract. There'll be bits you don't understand. Take advice on it. There'll be bits you don't like. Negotiate on that. And there'll be bits you'll want to put in. And by the way, once you've done 2 or 3 of these, and once you've seen our sample template contract, you'll get super comfortable with this. And you'll immediately go, no, this is what I'll do, that, and that. And it becomes real quick. It doesn't become that nightmare you think it might be. And also, because you're dealing with the contract so professionally, it's good for your image with the client. Yeah, they think, well, they understand what they're doing here. So first time is a little daunting, second time less so, third time, fine. You're absolutely on your way. So how else I protect myself? Get your payment schedule clear in the contract, okay? Is it so much up front, 30% on signing, 60% on delivery of the product, or 10% on acceptance? Never, ever, ever, ever agree to payment on acceptance, right? Because they'll just never accept it and never pay you. And believe it or not, we had some consulting businesses here that used to do that till I came, and I said, we're stopping that. And they weren't getting paid for 9 months. So be clear on what you want. Mobilization fee or amount up front is always good, because that means the client's got some skin in the game. So for example, in the rapid prototyping center that we look after, we have expensive materials we have to use. We won't do that unless you pay some money up front just to cover our risk. So it should be the same for you. Sometimes in a contract, you'll start some work and they'll say, actually, we decided we're not going to do this anymore, Keith, so we're going to stop it. That's fine. There's a clause in the contract. Sometimes in the creative industry, it's called kill clause, but it's the clause that says, okay, if I cancel this contract, you pay me everything right up to that date. Yeah, so there's no doubt about that. They can't say, well, you never did the contract, so I'm not going to pay you. That clause is in their standards. Just make sure you check that's in there. As I said before, don't ever work before the contract's signed. If you say, oh, it's in a hurry, the contract will come, don't do it. Just don't do it. If it's that urgent, the client will get the contract turned around quick. Also revisions, right? So sometimes we see this where they'll say, well, you need to change that, you need to rerun that, limit the number of times you have to do that. If that's your role, say you get 2 revisions for free. After that, 3, 4, 5, you're paying for it. So protect yourself dependent on your industry on that one. As I said before, understand how finance what your invoice, make it easy for them, call them up and say, hey, who do you need a purchase order number? What's the address? Blah, blah, blah. Have you got my bank details? All of that sort of stuff. Get that right and make it easy for people, and you'll get paid on time. So when stuff goes wrong, late payment fees, typically in your contract, you can charge interest on late payment. And usually you say, if your terms are 30 days, you're going to pay Bank of England rate plus X% if you're over 30 days in paying me. We've had some people, just one recently, who said, you're on 90-day payment terms. Now, it's kind of illegal. We don't do 90 days. 60 days is probably as far as they can push you. But they did pay within 30 days in the end. So just simply say, yeah. Another trick we've seen is saying, well, we can't pay you till you've given us your unique tax reference number, because you remember you're a sole trader individual. They don't need that. It's none of their business what your UTR is. That's between you and HMRC, and it's confidential. So just don't give them it. So if you're late, day 31, and I was late, I'll tell you my bank story in a minute. In day 31, you can start to raise an invoice for late payment. Just reissue the invoice with the late payment fees on there, okay? And it could be, Bank of England is currently 5%. You charge 13% on a daily basis, right? So it's 13% times divided by 365 times the number of days late they are, if it's 5, 10 or whatever. If it gets really nasty, you can take them to court. And if it's less than 5K, it's a very simple procedure, online, Scots courts, pay your money, and you pretty much get it. We've done that a number of times. Actually, we've used the English side to get the money. It's simple and effective. If it's a bit more than 5K, it's called ordinary cause. You need a lawyer because it's a little bit more complicated. But pursue them, right? They'll pay. They don't want to get a judgment against them. So in that first one, the simple procedure, I think if it's less than £1,000, it costs you 50, 40 quid. If it's 1,000 to 10,000, it's 70, and 10,000 above is 100. If that's what the invoice is, you can use those procedures. So to avoid all of that, get the contract. That's the sort of big takeaway. Be clear on what you're offering to them and what they're going to get. I had a bank that I was doing some work with. Regional manager was asleep at the switch, and one of the companies he'd loaned tons of money to, he didn't really understand what was happening in the company, and I explained it to his boss, who was the sort of head of banking for UK, and he was gobsmacked that he wasn't on top of it, and he was so fed up with me, he just didn't want to pay me. And in the end, I said, well, I'm cool with this. We'll just go to court, or I can go to your boss. Which way is it going to be? And in the end, he paid up. So even banks will try and not pay you. They'll try and stiff you. So we had a contract in place. They were clear what they were getting. They were clear on the payment process. But even they were trying to stiff me. So you will get bad clients, right? You'll get better at spotting them, and you'll get better at not having to deal with them. So, keep going with that. And then I just wanted to say that, as the great philosopher Nike said, just do it. Have some fun. You've got up to £1,000 as a side hustle. Try it. Have an experiment. see how it goes, and you have absolutely no idea where it might take you to. But if you have some particular questions, then come and talk to me and Bonnie or Cassidy outside of here. We're more than happy to help you. We like to see people getting on. And if you've got a particular skill set that you can use as a side hustle to make 10, 15, 20 grand on top of your job, why not? And so I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Keith, one thing I wondered if you might want to clarify, because I think we've got some staff on the call, is about staff who are interested in consulting, which arises from work they're doing for the university.
Yeah. So if you want to do consulting, yeah, you've got another option open to you. You can run it through the university consulting business, which we administer on this side. And basically what that allows you to do is not have to worry about dealing with tax, not have to worry about dealing with insurance, not have to worry about chasing customers or contracts. We do it all for you, and you get, I think 15% of the fee is for admin for us, 15% is for the school, and 70% of that money goes to you, either by way of salary or goes into your XYZ account for you to use to do good things with PhDs or whatever. So you can do consulting that way, or you can do it off your own bat, which case you do everything yourself: contract, chasing customers, insurance, etc.
Super. And we've got a question here is how does it work if you're also employed under PAYE? Is the freelancer income on top of your salary?
Yeah, so what will happen is you're under PAYE, you'll still, and you register as your business as a sort of sole trade business. You'll fill in a tax form and it'll have both things in. So you'll get your P60 from your PAYE job and you'll put the information into your tax form, and then you'll get your sole trader information and you'll put that into your tax form, and it will calculate how much tax you are due. You won't have to pay tax again on the PAYE. You've got credit for that.
To our next question from Rory. If you're already paying national insurance through uni salary, do you pay again through freelancer income?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So there is an opportunity to get relief against double NI, but you have to look at each individual case as it comes up.
And I guess I'll extend on that is how would they then look into that relief, Keith?
You're going to have to go to an accountant to take some advice on that. I mean, the reality is if you're doing small amount on as a sole trader, I mean, if sole trader is your only business, you're gonna want to pay some NIC because it's going to keep your pension record up to date. If it's your side hustle on that, then there's a way to say, okay, as part of my total income that I'm paying tax on, I've already paid X of NIC. So it's a bit like your PAYE. If you had 100 grand in PAYE, you're probably paying 40 grand in tax. You're not having to pay that again. You get credit for that 40 grand in your tax return. So it's only on the increment over the 100,000 from your side hustle that you'd pay some tax on, and it's the same impact. You get credit for the NIC you've paid.
Super. Another one, I was a freelancer for 10 years before I joined the university 9 years ago. I'm retiring next April and I'm thinking of doing some freelance work to supplement my pension pot. How would that affect my pension?
Not at all. What will happen is that you'll have retired. You'll be receiving a pension. You'll fill in your tax form, and you'll input, this is how much pension I'm getting, and this is how much my freelance side hustle is, and you'll pay tax, at the appropriate rate on that total amount.
Another one here. What about the new NI rules about sole traders with profits between 5k and 12k?
I think the NI rules are changing again, right? And I think it remains to be seen whether that stays or not. Okay, so the whole premise of what's going to come in is more people are being brought into the tax net, and NI, employers NI, is the way that the government is trying to sort of plug the gap at the moment. That is going to percolate down. So on sole traders, that ban that you're talking about, again, that's to try and catch people. So it's the same calculation. Go on to the government website page, type in national insurance, and you'll see how those rates play out.
I've got a question myself, which I'll ask while we're waiting to see if anyone else comes in, is actually about raising your prices. So For everyone here, my partner runs a side hustle and he absolutely has price increases. One of the things that he struggles with is actually communicating that to customers, because as soon as you tell your existing customers you're raising your prices, a lot of them don't like it. Have you got any tips on that, Keith?
Yeah, nobody likes raising prices, but I think you have to be tactical when you're doing it. So massive cost of living, inflationary increases, etc. Whenever there's inflation happening, when it was 7-8% or whatever it was, 11% when it was, you have to take advantage of that. You have to go, right? You can't put a 10% price increase when inflation's down at 2%. So you have to really ride that. Or if there's been a massive change in, I don't know, some material that's part of your process has gone up dramatically, you've got to use that to sort of try and get there. But general cost of living, I think everybody's using at the moment, and that's why you're seeing it. Fuel's expensive, cars are more expensive, maintenance of my machinery is more expensive, so you can definitely get 10% up.
Super. Thank you very much for that. Is there any last minute questions for Keith?
Yes, actually, I have a question. Maybe it's not relevant to Scotland or UK, but I had an institute, and the issue was that I was living in Germany and my customers were Americans in a state of America that they don't pay taxes, so at least income taxes. And I was the only one who could do the project that they want, or at least they found me, but I really didn't know that how can I deal with the taxes, because if I wanted to charge them with the German taxes, it could be really, really high. Back in the day, 49% tax was on that, and then they pay 0.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice on that? Because
Yeah.
they are at the moment I'm not working, but they are interested for the future, and I just simply don't know how to handle that.
So as I understand it, you're saying that the tax rate in Germany on your earnings with that client would have been 49%.
Back in the day, yeah. Now,
back in the day.
But
yeah,
now,
okay.
now might be like 39%, for example.
Yeah.
Now I'm in UK, but similar UK and Germany.
Yeah. So where the client is doesn't matter, does it? I mean, it's whatever the rate is for the piece of work. So if the client's in America or Australia or whatever, if you're agreeing £10,000 or £15,000 or £100,000 to do that piece of work, it's whatever you negotiate for that piece of work. Okay. The point I was making was that once you've earned that 100,000 and you're a UK taxpayer, for example, then you need to keep a bit of that aside to pay your tax when it falls due. Okay. If you're talking about VAT, right, where you might be in Germany and there's no VAT on US overseas, etc., then you don't. There's a sort of reverse charge type thing, which is too complicated to go into just now. You don't need to worry about that. I think what you're saying is, well, Keith, if I'm paying 49% tax, what price should you charge the client?
Yes, exactly, because then you lose your client that's in the United States, because the cost will become very high for them.
Yeah. So for me, the way I would answer that is I'd charge the client as much as I possibly could, given the value that I was transferring to them. So even if I was a 49% taxpayer, say you're in Germany at 49% and I'm in the UK at 29%, we both pitch for that piece of work and we both think it's £10,000, then that's all we'll get. You'll end up paying, 4,900 in tax, and I'll pay less tax than you, but the client doesn't care. It's what's the market rate for that piece of work. Now you could pitch higher and say, well, net, I want to get, but that's where you're sort of doing your research on the market. So you're in tax state, that is where you are. You just need to make sure that you keep some to pay. But in terms of setting prices, taxes won't set prices. Your negotiation with the client will set the price for the value that you're transferring. I might do a simple piece of work for somebody, takes me 5 minutes, and it saves them 50 grand. Okay. I'm not going to charge them £500, right? I'm going to charge them probably 10 grand for that piece of work that took me 5 minutes, because they're happy to pay me 10,000 because they just saved 50. So you have to think of it in the value that you're transferring to the client. I don't know if that answers your question, Bitter, but I'm happy to have an offline conversation with you if you want.
So then, for example, next time I should not think that, okay, I should charge them like 20% more because I have to pay that much taxes and yeah, and then because that was my impression also from what you were discussing.
I think you charge them as much as you think you can get away with. Absolutely. And the way you'll do that is by knowing what the size of their problem is, what it is you're doing to fix it. Can they go to anybody else? No. Charge them more. Is it a massive problem for them that they spent money on trying to fix and they can't do it? Charge them more. Because you're the only person, you're the unique person with that knowledge that can fix their problem. And then you can say to them, how big a problem is this for you? You know, how many people have been working on it? What does it do for your supply chain or wherever it is? And if you say, well, you know, this will benefit us by £1 million, whatever, charge them more. It's all in the conversation, but it's definitely not tax driven. Sorry, I've got Kevin.
Hiya, Keith. Thanks very much for the talk. It was really interesting. Just had a quick question about, I think right at the very beginning, you mentioned when you were talking about the different routes for like going to the HMRC or kind of starting a company. Yeah. You mentioned about like high risk activities in terms of, or like high risk consultancy. Is there an example? Can you provide some examples of that? Just
you might go down the limited company way if you're employing other consultants to help you deliver a project, right? Just because you've got a duty of care to them and it can protect you a little bit more. But it could be something like I don't know, you're providing health and safety advice on on some major assets, oil rig or wherever that's going to be, where the implications if something goes wrong are fairly significant. And they would be looking to point the finger of blame at somebody. So, you know, if you're making crochet hats for people, there's no problem there. But if you're doing something that is you know, has a high risk element to it, then you might want to put the protection of a company between you and them, because they have to sue the company, and then the company would have to sue you, but the company will have its own insurances, etc. And the reality is, as long as you're acting in good faith and doing things that you should do and have a duty of care to do them based on your own knowledge. So, for example, if I'm giving someone some accounting and tax advice, I'm held to a higher standard because I'm a chartered accountant. If you're giving somebody some tax advice, it's less of a challenge for you. So I'm really thinking of where the comeback for you as an individual would be disproportionate to the fee that you're earning, right? So if it's given some advice on explosives or something on that can have an impact on people who will say, well, hold on a minute, you've damaged me, I'm going to come and sue you.
Yeah.
Then you'd start to think, actually, I might be in a company for this one. But
Cheers.
each circumstance is it's on its own merits.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers.
Any other questions anyone would like to ask before we finish up? We will be sending out contact details. As Keith mentioned, he's happy to have one offline conversations with anyone if there's some maybe confidential questions you want to ask and don't want to ask here. That is also very okay. Nope, some thank yous. That's great. Thank you very much for everyone that's joined. Like I say, we'll be sending these slides out as well afterwards, along with the contact details, so you are more than welcome to get in touch with us. But thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you to Keith for hosting the session. Hopefully it's been very enlightening for all of you, and we hope to speak to some of you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.